Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming to Secrets to Land, a Zoom panel. Secrets to Land, a book deal Zoom panel, and great to see everybody. And I always say, I think I say in my book Bible, that if you were to get 12 authors in a room and ask them how they got their book deal, you would have 12 different stories. And so tonight is going to prove it. So I've invited some of my favorite, brilliant former students who all have books out, interestingly, in all different genres. And so I've invited them to come tonight to share the secrets of their success. And I'm especially intrigued that a lot of the stories are not the typical what you would expect. So there's some really brilliant, unusual ways that people went about getting their book deal. So we're going to talk about it. So let's start with Hyeseung Song has a debut memoir coming out called Docile, Memoirs of a Not So Perfect Asian Girl. And it's Simon and Schuster, comes out this July. And the common wisdom, which a lot of my students know I talk about, is that if you're going to write fiction, you have to write the whole book. And if you're going to write nonfiction, you write the proposal. And Hyeseung actually had a really interesting story where she wound up doing both. So Hyeseung, could you tell us about that? I found that so interesting.
Yeah. Thanks, Sue. Happy birthday, and thanks for inviting me to do the panel.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as Sue said, I'm the author of this book here that comes out on July 16th with Simon Schuster, and the publication story is a little windy. I imagine I'm the odd writer out because I did not write any short pieces first to get attention from agents. I only had one small publication before my book deal came together, and I took Sue's class last year to get a sense of what it would be like to pitch original pieces adjacent to the book launch. And I'm also a painter or a visual artist by trade, which is also very different from maybe some of the other panelists. But I've always been writing, and I started some of the first chapter of this book, Docile, in the creative writing workshops of my alma mater of Princeton when I was 19 or 20. And I'm 45 now. So like between 19 and 45, this 25, 26-year span, like what the hell was happening? In my mid 30s, I was writing. I was always writing, and it started to mount to something that looked like a book. But I, for a long time, didn't feel like the structure of my memoir was the right structure. I had a memoir and essays, and I kept writing, and I think most importantly, just kept living and experiencing the world. And when my mom died in 2016, a couple of years after that, I realized that I had a conclusion to the book, and I rewrote and restructured the entire memoir front to back. And I was revising when the pandemic hit. I live in New York City, and I have a painting studio outside my home, which I had to take a subway to. And during this time, there was a lot of anti-AAPI violence on the subway. So I stayed at home and I gave myself up to writing. In 2021, I decided to query, and I went out very strong. Almost every agent wanted pages, but I really wanted an AAPI, an Asian American agent. It felt so important and undeniable that I needed that for this time. And I found and queried a Korean American agent, Albert Lee of United Talent Agency, in May of 2021. And I had a book. Albert read the book, which was a shaggy dog of a manuscript, very long. It was I'm embarrassed to say, I think it was 110,000 words. He read it in a day and a half. He said, let's not revise the book. He wanted to write a proposal. So that was May of 2021. And we worked on June and July of 2021, that summer, on a proposal. And when it was finished in July, he said, let's wait August. Because nothing happens in August with the publication journey in New York City. So the Tuesday after Labor Day, the first day back, when everybody is back at their desks, we went on sub with a 60-page proposal. SNS, Simon & Schuster, reached out the same day around 1 p.m. It was a Korean American editor who was interested in my story. I had no idea what a huge deal that was, but we set up a call and they asked for a preempt. So like Sue said, I wrote the book, but I also wrote a proposal. And in the subsequent 2 years, we've been editing the book and the book is now 68,000 words, and it comes out in July. So, and this,
Story.
yeah, and this blisteringly gorgeous cover is also by a Korean American artist as well. So thanks,
You know,
Sue.
it's funny because I always joke that my first book took 13 years from start to finish. So instead of a book launch, it got a book mitzvah, but I think you have me beat, but I heard that.
Totally.
So keep that in mind that everybody always wants there to be an equation. Like everyone says, okay, for a memoir, do I need a, do I need a proposal or do I need a whole manuscript? But sometimes you need both. So I love that. That's a
Yeah.
great story. Okay, so next, Mark Williams and Amy Scher have an upcoming book called Out in the World, which is an LGBTQ travel guidebook from National Geographic. So, and I'm going to try to, even though sometimes it's the categories are complicated, we'll talk about the categories. So, Mark, I remember in my class, you started publishing all over, and you had a great New York Times Modern Love, and you had Washington Post, and you've written a lot of LGBTQ pieces. So do you think that establishing this platform for yourself helped you get this book deal?
Yes, absolutely. And happy birthday, and thank you for having me. But
Thank
I
you.
think definitely writing and publishing articles that were LGBTQIA plus focused, but also inclusive to everyone, helped me land a platform necessary to publish a book like this. Yes, for sure.
And you know what? Somebody asked me to mute everybody again because there's funny noises. So I'm muting everybody. So Mark, make sure that you unmute again when you speak. Okay, so now Mark, the other thing that you did that I think is brilliant, which I've done myself, is that you don't have any books out. And so you combined with Amy, who has a track record for getting books out. So do you think that aside from having a platform in the area of LGBTQ, in the area of travel, I know you've traveled and written beautiful pieces about it. Do you think combining with somebody in this case helped you get the book deal?
Definitely. I mean, Amy's a brilliant author and already had a bunch of books out. So she was already known in the literary world, whereas I was just focusing more on publishing clips. So the combination of, and Amy had clips too, but the combination of me having a bunch of travel related clips, Amy being a published author, both of us being represented by the same agent, I think that definitely helped us land the book deal for sure.
Yeah, and you know what I think is brilliant is that whenever I combine with somebody, I think that it's great to combine with somebody who has something you don't have. So I think that's so interesting that I think that worked out great that that you picked somebody who had a lot of experience doing books and you have experience doing short pieces. So that's fantastic. So congratulations. Okay, so Raj Tawney has a book called Colorful Palate, which is a memoir, which came out recently from Fordham University Press in hardcover. But Raj actually just told me he had great news because he recently sold a middle grade novel. So Raj, since we don't have anyone else here talking about middle grade, if I remember correctly, if you're going to do any fiction book, but middle grade, which is usually ages, kids book age 8 to 12, you usually have to write the whole novel. So Raj, tell us, did you wind up writing the whole novel, and tell us a little bit about how you got your deal, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Happy birthday again, Sue.
Sure.
Yeah, I wrote the proposal in the middle of trying to sell the memoir, actually. When the memoir didn't sell originally, I was encouraged to kind of work on something else. And so I started working on the manuscript, and I finished a draft in about a year or so. And then when I was able to sell the memoir on my own without an agent, I sold it to Fordham University Press. And then the buzz from that book that it received last year, I was able to kind of capitalize on it. And I still didn't feel like I really didn't, I don't think any agent was really interested in me anyway, just because I write about being mixed in America. I'm Indian, Puerto Rican, and Italian, so I write a lot about the mixed experience in America. I'm not sure how profitable it is in an agent's mind, but when the book started to get a lot of critical acclaim, I was able to shop it around myself, and I got some pretty big publishers interested, small publishers interested, and I ended up with Baker and Taylor, who's kind of like a little major indie, and they started a publishing division called Paw Prints, and they really believed in the story. So they love the manuscript, and their team has been really great, encouraging me to keep working on it. And so I'm excited to say it's coming out in October.
Okay, and if you don't mind, you said to me, just because say somebody wants to write a middle grade novel, you told me that you read a lot of middle grade novels to get the voice down. And then this one all mixed up, it says, is an adventurous and timely story of a young multi-ethnic American boy who forges a complex friendship with a Pakistani immigrant in the wake of 9/11. And it's planned to come out in October. So do you think that the first thing people should do if they want to, write for a specific genre is to read a whole bunch of books? And also, did the fact that there's an autobiographical element to that help you, since you already you have so many great pieces? I know in my class you were publishing left and right, and you also have the memoir Colorful Palate out. So did you use your platform for nonfiction to help you get the fiction deal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when a lot of the publishers were rejecting me for the memoir, and they kind of were implying that they wanted me to have a little bit more drama in my life, and I wouldn't do it, I think that's when I started working on a middle grade fiction to kind of base it on my life and then really take it one step forward using my imagination, I suppose. And I had to read a lot of middle grade. I was already a fan of middle grade, but I read a lot more Jerry Spinelli, Lisa Phipps, even Sherman Alexie, even though that's YA. Oh, and The World in Between, which was actually a big influence on me because I saw what you can do with both memoir and fiction. So that was still on my shelf. It's one of my favorites. So I was really inspired by those kind of titles.
Yeah, and by the way, it's interesting because so I did a co-authored book with Kenan Trubincevic that was a memoir called Bosnia List, and then based on short pieces, because he was a Bosnian Muslim immigrant, and he wrote a piece during the Trump Muslim ban. Based on that, actually a former student of mine, a brilliant editor at FSG, Joy Peskin, said this would make a great middle grade book. And I'm like, tell me about middle grade. So actually we did the exact same thing, which is we went from the same story in a way we told in memoir, and then we told it the fictional version. And the other thing cool about that is sometimes a memoir, they will market to high schoolers. So if you try to do a YA, it sort of gets in the way of your audience, but it doesn't get in the way if it's middle grade fiction. So that's why we did both. So that's interesting. You did it that way too. Okay, so Alyssa Ages, her book is called A Journey to Uncover the True Meaning of Secrets of Giants. And it recently came out in hardcover from Penguin Random House, Avery, which is an imprint. And interestingly, Alyssa was telling me this is kind of a cross between, it's like a health book, and it has to do with lifting weights, which is interesting, and it says also weightlifting, psychological aspects, muscle strength, health, but it's also a memoir. And Alyssa, I want to hear about it. And also, I always tell the secret that I use ghost editors. I pay professional editors, usually former literary agents or book editors, and I pay them to help me kick the manuscripts into shape. And so that, and it's something I like to talk about because that's really why I broke in. And Alyssa, you actually wound up using somebody to help you also, right?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, happy birthday and thank you for having me. So yeah, I mean, the first part we were saying kind of it's a mix of things. So we've sort of landed on saying that it's part personal narrative, part research mission, part midlife crisis odyssey into the world of strength. So it's my story, and then it's a lot of athlete stories, as well as research, mostly original research, talking to thought leaders and psychologists and scientists to try to really understand why we care so much about the pursuit of strength. So I have a journalism background, and when I had the idea for the book, one of the first things I did was reach out to a friend of mine who is a fellow author, a really successful author. And when I told him about my idea, he said, well, one of the things I do is I work as a consultant for writers who want to put together their first proposal. And I help them kind of guide them through the process of how to structure the proposal, how to make it sellable. And so I ended up hiring him, and I worked with him. And basically what it was sort of, I had an idea of the structure of how to put together a proposal from quite literally just Googling it. And then he sort of pushed me throughout, in particular, to really add more of my story. My original idea for the book was for it to be just kind of an exploration of the subculture of strongman. And then I realized that was really niche and like not a lot of people were going to read that. So it ended up being my own story in the world of strength, and trying to kind of understand why that's compelled me for so much of my life. So he would really routinely read a section and go, okay, more of you, more of you. And then at the end of that process, when we decided that it was ready to go, part of the deal was that he would send it to his agent first. And that if his agent wasn't interested, then he would help me kind of figure out who else to send it to. And it turned out that his agent was interested. I signed with him, and then his agent kind of moved it through the process of getting the publishing deal.
Cool. And if you don't mind me mentioning, I mean, some of these very, very high level ghost editors or coaches, book coaches, they could charge a lot of money. And in, you know, we're talking, I paid anywhere myself from, I mean, I know someone that'll do it for 300 from a small house, but I paid 2,500 for my first book and then got a 50,000 advance. And there's some of them charge as much as $5,000 or $6,000. And some people say, well, that's ridiculous, I can't afford it. But I had a shrink who, and I always recommend therapy, but I had a shrink who said, you know, I had wasted 7 years banging my head against the wall trying to sell a book. And he said, sometimes you have to spend money to make money. So Alyssa, were you conflicted about whether to spend a lot on this, or did it immediately pay off when he gave you the connection to the agent?
I think it was a combination. The money was definitely a lot, but because I knew him so well and I knew what it was like just to get advice from him for free, I kind of had a hunch it would be worth it. And once I got the deal, I realized it was definitely worth it. It was a small investment towards getting that bigger book deal.
Interesting. Okay, now Amy Scher, you're doing the book with Mark called Out in the World. But I remember you had an interesting story with your first book, and you also had some of your books have that interesting hybrid where they seem like they're first-person memoirs, but they also have a self-help element. So could you talk a little bit? And I think if I remember correctly, you also do what I do, which is some of your books are like Simon & Schuster, big publishers, and then some of them you go with little publishers. And I was really intrigued to hear that you actually had a better experience with a small publisher. So tell us a little bit. So your first book was How to Heal Yourself When No One Else Can?
Yeah, so my first book was, hi everybody, my first book was a self-help book. And I just have to say also, Mark and I met in Sue's class. So you never know what can happen when you come to one of Sue's events. You may find a co-author. So my first book was a self-help book, and it sold for almost no money, like very almost no money. I'll just say, because I think it's good for us to talk about money. My publisher, which is a medium-sized publisher and a very niche in mind, body, spirit, offered me no advance, because for first-time authors, they offered no advance. And my agent negotiated up to $1,500. And I took the book deal. I thought they were a great publisher. I went in and it launched my whole career. So I know, I just want to say, most people have fantasies of being with the big, however many they are at the moment. But I think being humble and getting your foot in and just being open to all experiences is really important, because now I just finished my 6th book. I sold them all on proposal, and it was all because I was willing to kind of go in at a level lesser than maybe I had imagined. But it really taught me a lot about publishing in a low stakes way. And that book kind of blew everybody's mind. It did really well. It sold 10,000 copies the first year, which is a lot for an author with, I had like 1,000 Facebook followers at the time. And so that was kind of my first experience. And then each book from then, I moved up and on. And I actually, after my 3rd book, which was with Simon & Schuster, was a memoir, I went back to a smaller publisher because it's just a different experience. And so that's sort of my story of all my books in a nutshell. And then obviously Mark and I sold our travel book to National Geographic, and all of these were on proposal.
Fantastic. Interesting. Okay. So Lina Zeldovich, so you have a book called The Other Dark Matter, The Science and Business of Turning Waste into Health and Wealth. And it's Chicago University Press. And she got the hugest rave. I couldn't even believe how many words it was in the New York Review of Books. So I was totally jealous. And Lina, interestingly, I remember in my class, you were publishing these great short pieces, and you're writing about science, and you're writing, and you were a science editor. So how did this book start? I think you mentioned that you did two short pieces on the subject, right?
Right. So I did 2 features for 2 different publications on the science of poop. And nobody likes to talk about the subject, but for some reason, everybody likes to share. And these pieces go up. So yeah, they both went viral. One was republished in I don't even remember how many places, and the other one is still one of the top performing articles in that publication. So I started thinking maybe there's something more in there. I didn't have an agent at the time. I should say that I also have 5 novels that I still couldn't sell. And at that point, I didn't think I could sell a book. I thought I had a curse on me, period. Could be a successful journalist, but book, forget it. And then kind of serendipitously, I met my agent before she became an agent. Before that, she was an editor, a science editor at Macmillan, where she was buying a bunch of science books, but she was fed up with corporate bureaucracy and she was leaving. And she was like in this kind of like middle, not an editor anymore, not an agent yet, and didn't know what she wanted to do. But she started talking to me and she said, oh, that can be a book. And I asked, well, can you send me some proposals of books that you bought? And she did. She sent me 3 and I read all of them and I got a sense. I mean, I finally figured out what should be in the proposal. I started writing this proposal and for about a year, she was following up with me asking, hey, you've done that? Can I see? Can you send me this? Can you send me that? And then she joined an agency and signed up her first client and maybe a second client. I think I was her either second or third client. Then one day we went out for coffee and I thought we're going to talk about this maybe one day, who knows, a book. And she brought me a contract and was like, here's a contract, sign, we're going. And then once the proposal took at least a year, if not a year and a half. And then once the proposal was done, she sold it within a month in an auction to 3 different houses. 3
And
houses.
it's interesting that you decided to go, like Raj, you decided to go with a smaller university press. Some people feel that there's more prestige with the university press and that you get reviewed better. And with you, did you just make a decision? Was it just the editor you liked the most or the most amount of money? How do you decide if you get 3 offers?
There were actually 2 editors I liked, Chicago University Press and one more. But I think overall package with Chicago was better. It was a better advance. Some other, clauses in the contract were better. For example, there were no clause that if I write a second book ever, which I did, I have to, offer them my second book first. Some publishing houses tuck in these clauses and they're really nasty. There were a couple of other things that I like about Chicago. I talked to other people who were published by Chicago, and they said it's a good university press. They're gonna do a decent job of marketing your book. They're responsive. All in all, after these 3 bidding, went back and forth, and I decided to go with Chicago, and I think I still think it was a good decision.
Cool. Sharon Sochil Washington is the author of the debut novel, The Blue is Where God Lives, which you're calling Afro-Magical Realism, and it was published by Abrams in hardcover recently. And Sharon, you actually told me a great story, which is you told me not only did you use a ghost editor, which is my technique, and of course, if it's a novel, you write the whole book, but you had an interesting story where the agent said no, and you didn't take no for an answer, which I love. So would you mind telling us that story?
Yeah, so hey everyone, and happy birthday, Sue. And I just want to say before I jump into this, whatever Sue tells you to do it. I also remember Mark from one of Sue's class, so congratulations. I didn't know you had sold a book. But yeah, so yeah, whatever she says, do it because it works. So what I did is I wrote the entire novel. I worked with an editor because I have a background in journalism. And so I remember when I was a beat reporter, I'd go out and do a story. I'd come back, I'd submit it at 3. The editor would clean it up and move things around and give it a title, and it'd go to print at 5. So I never write without an editor. So I worked with 2 freelance editors because the first one was a developmental editor. I had written the manuscript in 2013, And when I finished writing 70,000 words, I didn't know what to do with it. I put it in a closet, literally in a binder for 6 years. I knew that something needed to be done. I didn't know what. So I worked with a developmental editor to produce the really first version. After that, I worked with a second line editor to actually clean it up and make it make sense. Then I submitted it to an agent, only one agent, and she read it and responded with the most beautiful rejection letter that I've ever seen. So because it was such a beautiful letter, it looked like a New York Times review of like, go buy this book. I decided to ask her if I had it edited once again, would she reread it? Because basically her response was that it still needed some tightening. And I agree with her. But her response was that this may be my writing style and she didn't want to encroach upon it. So I said, can I just have it re-edited and will she reread it? And she said yes, which I learned later that agents almost never say yes. Like you get one chance with them, especially this agent. She's with Sterling Lord Literaristic. So it's like a major literary agency in New York. And so they get like hundreds of proposals a week. And so they normally never read more than once, but she said yes.
Fantastic.
So then she recommended an editor because I asked her to recommend a freelance editor that I could write with. She did. I worked with that editor. So that's 3 editors. And I had to pay all of these out of my pocket and they were expensive. And after the reworking, sent it back to the agent and she said yes. And that's how Blue came to publish. I also want to say to anyone out there who has been writing and who has been told by any number of people and ways and ideas that you can't get this done, just ignore it. I was told when I was an undergrad at Columbia University by a TA that I would never make it at the university because I can't write. And it kind of devastated me for years. But years after that, I got this book published by Abrams Books, which is a medium-sized publisher in New York, a very like respectable publisher, got a very respectable agent. And it just goes to tell you that not everything people tell you is true.
And there's 2 things I wanted to mention. One is I want for one of my books, I used 4 ghost editors altogether for $4,000 and I got a $50,000 advance. So it was totally worth it, but it just, some books just take a long time to gel. The other thing I hope you don't mind me mentioning, Sochil, is that you're an anthropologist. So I just want to point out that there's a lot of people, I mean, there's people like me who only wanted to be a writer since they were 12 and took, English major and creative writing MFA, but then there's a lot of people who are in other fields. So I would just say, it might be a little bit unrealistic for somebody that's in a totally different field for a lot of years to think they could jump in and snap their fingers and be a writer. So I'm just saying that hiring a ghost editor to help you, especially if you're not a longtime writer, that I think that makes perfect sense, right? Because you have a whole other field that you spent, that you're very acclaimed in. So I just wanted to throw that.
Yeah, so I am a cultural anthropologist, and actually the anthropology sort of helped me with the creative writing because it helps me build worlds, which is anthropologists study cultural experiences. So it helped me build worlds. It was really supported to the background of what I was doing in the book and in the creative fiction that I write.
Interesting.
But again, like Sue says, like having those ghost editors was really critical to me getting that. To me having the success that I did. Although it was expensive, I got a $50,000 advance from my first book, which I'm also told is very unusual for a first-time writer. I think I had like 200 people on my Facebook like followers. I had no platform. I wasn't even on like Instagram and those other places. So having those ghost editors was really critical.
Great. And by the way, if anybody wants to email me later to get recommendations of ghost editors, I can recommend the ones that I've used that have helped me sell books. And I usually go with people who are editors or agents or former editors or agents. But if anybody wants specifically to get information about the ghost editors that were used by the panelists, you can email me and I'll be happy to help you. And if any of the panelists want to share either your emails or your social media or links to buy your book or anything like that, please do it in the chat. Okay, so Tyler Kelley was a former student of mine at the New School, and he started publishing. Hilariously, he hated my first assignment, which I have in Byline Bible, which is write about your most humiliating secret. And he only wanted to write third-person pieces. And I have this line with Writing in Love, which is you could do anything as long as it works. And within minutes, he was like in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg, and he got a piece in the New Yorker. And he wound up with a fantastic agent, I think based on a piece. And his book is Holding Back the River, The Struggle Against Nature on America's Waterways, which is kind of like environmental narrative nonfiction in the vein of John McPhee. So Tyler, would you say that starting with writing short pieces was a good way to begin?
Hi, Sue. Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks everybody for coming. Yeah, absolutely. I think the book was launched off of a piece I did for the New York Times. I think it was a Sunday business section, but I did a long piece about, it was during, I think it was 2016, infrastructure was a big deal, aging infrastructure. Everyone was talking about it. Trump and Hillary were both talking about it. So I did an infrastructure piece about this old lock and dam. So I said, well, here's an angle on infrastructure that you all don't know about. And that piece did pretty well in the New York Times. And then my agent had approached me for doing a different story for the NewYorker.com about people that find lost rings. So she approached me and said, do you have a book idea? Which I feel very fortunate that I didn't have to sort of go find her. And people ask me now, how do you get an agent? I still don't know the answer because luckily this one just sort of came to me. But so she had asked me if I had a book, and I didn't really have a good answer. But then this infrastructure stuff came along. I did the piece for the Times. And then I said, this is really interesting. I really like this. People are interested, excuse me, in the piece. And then I sort of used that. I expanded that story into my sample chapter in my proposal, actually, and used that to do the proposal.
And how many pages was your proposal, would you say?
70, maybe.
How many
yeah.
sample chapters?
It was really just one. And then I did a pretty literary overview with some more like writerly stuff. And then I actually used a ghost editor on the proposal to help me kind of put it into shape. And my agent was also very cool about like looking at drafts and giving me line edits and stuff like that.
Cool. And if anyone's interested in my the book Bible, How to Sell Your Manuscript No Matter What Genre Without Going Broke or Insane, I do list all the different elements of a nonfiction book proposal. Now, Banning, you also had an interesting story. Banning Lyon, he is the author of the upcoming debut memoir, The Chair in the Valley. And if I remember correctly, Banning, you had written this whole memoir, and you were having some trouble selling it, and by publishing a piece in the Washington Post, all of a sudden that was the breakthrough. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm pretty much everything about my story, along with really everything about my life, is really bizarre and is not how things should be. So firstly, I'm a debut author. I had no proposal. I had no history as an author or writing other than a New York Times op-ed, which I wrote in 1993. I'm 52. I'm older. I have no social media. I have like 90 followers on Twitter. My manuscript was long as like 95,000 words. The only thing I had was my story, which is so bizarre and shocking to people and it's relevant today. It's about being institutionalized in an abusive psychiatric hospital that wound up leading to the largest health insurance fraud settlement in the history of the United States. And so I knew all I had was my story, and I knew it had to be beautiful. And so I spent 6 years writing my manuscript. I polished it, rewrote it over and over and over and over and over. And I took a year off and studied style and grammar. And when I shopped it around, I very fortunately really got my top pick for an agent. I wound up with Meg Thompson, who's in New York. She runs her agency. She's one of the leading agents in the country. I was very, very fortunate. And when I got her, I knew that a lot of the work was over. So, but I still had a big hurdle to get over. I had to get a publisher. So Meg and I worked on the manuscript very lightly. I mean, she made almost no changes at all, and very light stuff. And then after being with her for a few months, she said, well, just offhandedly, she said, why don't you do me a favor and just write an article about your story? Your writing is so compelling, and your story, and so I just kind of offhandedly wrote a story. It was an essay about my life, and 95% of it took me 45 minutes, but the last paragraph took me like 2 days to polish. And then we published it, and the Washington Post picked it up, and almost immediately I sent it to them first thing, and they were like, yes, we want to buy this.
I think you met, yeah, I know, remember when you took my class, did you meet Alyssa Klein in the class? Did
Yeah,
she? Yeah.
correct. I took Sue's class at my agent's recommendation, met Allison Klein at the Washington Post, sent her the story, and she's like, yes, I'll buy this. So I got, once it published, I got probably hundreds of messages from people all over the world, but I didn't get any responses from publishers, and it just kind of seemed like this fart in the wind that didn't really go anywhere. And after about 2 months, my agent calls me one day. And when your agent calls you, it's either really good news or really bad news. And so I was like, this is either really good or really bad. And so she said, are you sitting down? And agents can fire clients. And I thought she's going to fire me because we hadn't found a home for my book, even though it's only been a couple months. And I said, no. And so she said, well, go sit down. And so I sat down, and she said, do you know who Maria Shriver is? And I was like, is this a joke? Like, have you met somebody who's the name Maria Shriver who's not the Maria Shriver? And she started laughing. She said, no, Maria Shriver read your piece in the Washington Post, and she runs the most prestigious imprint on Penguin Random House. They only publish 4 books a year, and she wants your book. And I just sort of lost it. I mean, I was in tears. And so, against all odds, debut author having no experience, I wound up getting a 6-figure advance for a debut memoir with no social media followers. And I spent, I just finished editing it, and the first past pages are being submitted tomorrow, and it comes out June 4th. I'll share the cover here in a minute and link the pre-order. We haven't done a book reveal or gone public yet, but it's still available for pre-order.
Fantastic. And by the way, I will say, and I write about this in Book Bible and Byline Bible, I've had many students who have written one piece, and like Tyler got a literary agent, like Banning found a great editor. I remember last year or 2 years ago, Tiffany Drayton, who took my new school class, did a great piece in the New York Times called Black American Refugee, and had a 6-figure book deal in 2 weeks from Viking. So I will say, if someone's impatient, or if you are having trouble, you don't feel like you have a platform, or you're having trouble getting headway, or having trouble getting agents to call you back, I always say 3 pages can change your life. So and here's some examples. And for the people that, especially Tyler and Banning, since you just mentioned it, why don't you, and actually Raj and Mark, a lot of you did great short pieces. If you don't mind, share some of them in the chat, because sometimes one short piece could really, I mean, there'll be people with no platform whatsoever. Like my former student, Aspen Matus, was 21, had no platform, wanted to write a book, did a New York Times Modern Love, and a HarperCollins editor called her the next day. So even if you don't have a platform, you can give yourself a platform by publishing one fantastic piece. Okay, now Stella Grizont is the author of the upcoming book, The Work Happiness Method, Master the 8 Skills to Career Fulfillment. And that's a work self-help book, a career self-help book. And Stella is a leading happiness expert, positive psychology practitioner, executive coach, and speaker. And so a lot of times, if you're going to do a self-help book, and we mentioned Amy was in the health arena self-help book, a lot of times it's great to have a platform. So Stella, you have a great platform. Now, if you don't mind me mentioning it, you did something so brilliant that I've never heard in your proposal, which is because Stella has corporate clients. In her proposal, she mentioned that she went to her corporate clients and asked them if they would commit in advance to buying her book, and a whole bunch did. And she wrote that in her proposal, and I think you got an even bigger deal from Penguin based on that. So Stella, that was such a brilliant idea. How did you come up with that?
Thank you. I was just trying to figure out, how do I desperately prove that working with me would be a good deal. And I don't know. I thought of that, and I thought, I'm not holding anyone to a contract, but if I could at least have a verbal agreement and write that down, maybe that would help. I I just decided to do it. And so I had 3 clients say that they would buy, you know, various sums of books. And I also, my agent advised me to list all of my speaking engagements, which I do, you know, during the pandemic at home. I was able to do like 85 speaking engagements from Zoom, which was amazing. And so I just demonstrated that I had audiences. I don't have a social media, much of social media, anything. But I do have an email list that I've been building over time. And yeah, but it took me, you know, I would say 9 years from the moment I decided to write a book to write it. And so I felt like I was very much guided to that time. I felt now I can see it was on purpose and that I wasn't ready before. And I took Sue's class to try to write an article and get that pushed out there, and no one would take the article. But thankfully, with the book, I got, it took me 9 years to finish the proposal. And then I got an agent through my friend. And within a month, we had 4 publishers bidding. And then I got a pretty nice deal. I got 85,000 for my first deal.
That's amazing. And how many pages was your proposal?
I think it was in the 70-ish range as well. And I wrote the intro and 2 chapters. And I talked about, everything that you would in a nonfiction proposal. And I
Did your
referenced
agent
your book.
help you with the proposal?
My agent?
And did they help you with the proposal?
Yeah, because at first I did like a mini proposal just to be like, would you be my agent? And she was like, yeah. She's like, but you need to add all these things. And so that took me 3 years. I was procrastinating on it and had
Well,
a
you also,
baby.
if I remember, you have a husband, 2 kids, and a whole huge business, right? So
Yeah,
yeah, so there was a lot going on.
there was
Very,
a lot going on.
very exciting. What a great, amazing deal. And what's your pub date?
March 5th, here it is.
Oh, fantastic. Great. We'll have to celebrate together.
I'd love that.
Okay, Orlando Mendiola is the author of the upcoming children's picture book, The Last Tamale, from HarperCollins. So I love this story with you, Orlando, that you knew you wanted to write a book, but I remember you took my class and you weren't really sure. And you just asked really smart questions, and that led you, I think, to your project. So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. So when I started the class back in like 2021, I just had the book idea, The Last Tamale, and it was about a family based on like my childhood of making tamales with my grandma growing up every Christmas, and it was just an idea. I wanted to see like what the process would be like if I ever down the line wanted to publish a book. And so I started just asking questions about children's books. There weren't many other children's book writers in that class, so I was just trying to get all the information, and I would talk about the title, like kind of just like what the book was about, and it just based on the idea, it got attention from editors at different publishers. So
If you don't mind, I'm going to mention something specific that you did, which was in my Zoom classes, I bring in a lot of editors and agents, and I always think it's great if you mention your idea, which we call a Hollywood movie pitch, because you never know if they're going to spark to it. And if I remember correctly, when Lisa Sharkey, who's the vice president of HarperCollins, came, I remember you saying, I'm working on a book about my Texas Latino family called The Last Tamale. And I think I remember her being like, I want that. Like, didn't you just like throw it out there and she was already interested?
yes, that's what made me be like, wow, I can actually write this and kind of strike while the iron's hot, kind of like get the attention to it. So I ended up writing the book and
And what is it?
getting
It's the picture book's about 1,000 words.
Yes, it's 1,000 words, 32 pages, ages
And what
4
age?
to 8.
Yeah, ages 4 to 8. Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind also mentioning, I think you rewrote it a lot of times. How many times do you think you rewrote it?
I rewrote it. There were so many different versions. And with Sue's help, I listened to Sue. She gave me a lot of feedback with it, and then once I got to a version that I liked, I sent it to an agent that had visited Sue's class, and
My
then that
agent's
agent,
yeah,
hmm
so
and
cool.
she gave me feedback, and then I applied that feedback to the draft, and then I ended up signing with her. So this was in 2022, and then like earlier in the year, and then later that year, we got the book deal.
How old are you now?
27.
It was like they were having a fight between Random House and HarperCollins for his book. So I was like, congratulations, fuck you. Oh my God. Your 20s to have that. That's amazing. And when is your book coming out again?
September 3rd.
Okay, you're gonna have to come to New York and we'll celebrate. Anyway, so those are fascinating stories of how people broke in. And now I'd like to go back to everybody and ask, do you have any specific advice that might help other people working on similar books? So, Hyeseung, you wrote your whole manuscript, and then you said you wound up writing a proposal and it took you a long time. Is there any advice? I mean, it's a hard market for memoir. Oh, and I also love the fact that you knew who your audience was and you wanted to get an editor and agent who totally understood you, which by the way, I've heard that story before and I find it fascinating. So what advice do you give to people that are trying memoirs now? Because it is it's a hard market for memoirs.
Yeah, it really is actually. Simon and Schuster wanted to have like a 1-year timeline for publication. So we were basically finished with the manuscript really, really early so that they could get galleys out like 10 months in advance. The memoir market the space is really crowded. That being said, I think I'm the poster child for don't rush it, but at the same time, feel the fire in your belly. Take the time you need to make things excellent. And in the meantime, I think your lived experience is fodder for your creativity and your creative writing. Your lived experience will make it into the work if you want it to. And that's the only trickle down economics that there really is. I do have a couple of other pieces of advice, if that's okay, Sue. I would just say, like, in the meantime, while you're doing your work, just find community. This is a great place. Like Sue is a testimonial for people getting connected to each other. I feel like the literary industry has a lot of gatekeepers, and like you don't want to get involved with people who feel that level of scarcity and anxiety. Find your tribe and build it, and with people who feel enoughness. And then also, like, even if you get a book deal, I think what I did was like I dreamt up until the book deal, and I didn't think about like what comes after. Be a smart student, do the research, get the publisher's marketplace subscription, read all the acknowledgments in the back of the books that you really like, and find the agents that are being thanked, see the deals, and go on to panels like these, because there's lots of great ways of different ways to get to the same place, which I think is the moral of this story. So yeah, so thank you.
Cool. Mark Jason Williams, I know you wanted to do a book for a while, and I thought it was interesting. Maybe the first book wasn't the exact one that you thought of, but that was the same with me. I tried a novel that I couldn't sell for 7 years, and one of my mentors read it and said, I said, what'd you think? And she said, you have no imagination whatsoever. Why are you writing fiction? And kind of broke my heart. And then it turned out she was right. And I sold 5 nonfiction books before I was able to finish my novel. So do you think being open-minded to new projects is a good idea, Mark? Or do you think that being in the New York Times and the Washington Post and doing all the travel pieces, has that been encouraging?
Yeah, I think both. I mean, my essay collection wasn't getting the traction in terms of selling it that I wanted. And you said to me, you travel a lot, why aren't you writing travel stories? So the ability to just switch and focus on travel stories while still doing essays and being in Modern Love and the Washington Post, like you can do multiple things at a time. And the thing I'll say about publishing a book is that if you see a void in the market, that's what you need to go for. I'm a 45-year-old gay guy that loves to travel, but there was no travel book that told me how to go antiquing with my husband. All the travel books said go to Miami and party, and if there was, there weren't any LGBTQ focused travel books. If there were a travel section, it was in the back of a Lonely Planet or other guide, and it focused on bars and clubs and stuff that, maybe I'm not that into or other people aren't that into. So Amy and I got together and we realized that there was no great or any LGBTQI focused travel guide. And we also wanted to open it up and be inclusive to our friends and allies, because ultimately people want to go to the same places. You don't need separate guides, you just need a safe space.
I love what you say about, I love that about what does the market need? And I remember when I was doing my addiction book, Lighting Up, there were all these millions of addiction books about people quitting crack and alcohol and heroin, but there was none about people getting off of cigarettes or dope. So that was my niche. So that's brilliant. That's great advice. Yeah, Amy, do you have anything to add? So you've done both self-help and memoir. So what do you have to add if anybody wants to break into those genres?
Yeah, I would say, I think my biggest advice to writers is people always say, how long does it take to write a book? And I always say, it takes me as exactly how long I have. So while we, want to give ourselves the time, you also really have to hold yourself accountable. I wrote 6 books in 6 years because I write consistently. That doesn't mean I write for hours a day, but what I found is when I take a break from a book or the gym, I don't go back. And so what I do is I commit to writing 5 days a week. Even if it's only 5 minutes some days, it helps me stay connected to the project, and I'm faster and faster and faster because of that. If I lose my momentum, I have to then reread it and remember what I was writing and regain my creativity. And so I would say, write like you have a deadline. I've written books in a year and a half because that's how long my publisher gave me. And guess what? When my publisher gives me 4 months, I do that too. And so I
by the way, I think that's what's great about not only classes, but also writing groups, writing workshops, because then you have a deadline and you have to get pages in. So that's a great idea. Raj, anything to add in terms of you've just written a middle grade novel, and I know you've published tons of great pieces and you have a memoir out. So what kind of advice do you give people?
My best advice is to really truly believe in the work you're doing. Even when the agent couldn't sell my book and they basically gave up on me, the editor that was in-house at the agency believed in the work so much that she stayed with me even after I left the agency. And she really was she was such a big encouragement that when I finally took it around and got a few offers from a few smaller and university presses, she taught me how to negotiate that deal just out of friendship. And she stayed with me on the middle grade. So it's really like having people around you who believe in you and really believing in yourself. And like Amy, publishing large and small places, it's really about who believes in you and wants to invest their time in you, honestly, surrounding yourself with good people.
Good.
And when the book came out, I had lost contact with Sue for a couple of years, but as soon as she heard about it, she stepped right up and was so supportive and did everything she could to support the book like she does for so many authors. So it meant the world to me.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one of my speakers always says that the best way to get ahead in writing is to be a good literary citizen. And so what I found is so many people have been so kind with my books and helped me done book parties and book events and stuff like that. So it's so exciting to, if it's a former student or a colleague, to buy their book, or how can I help, or let me come to your reading, or let me post about it. And by the way, everybody here, you could buy these books. You could just post, you could say, oh my God, I just met this amazing author, and post the picture, it's for free. Post the picture of their cover and say, it's coming out so-and-so, come to their event, or here's their new online event. And it just makes you look cool, and it's good karma, and it's kind, and it's someone will, repay the favor to you afterwards. Okay, Alyssa. So I love your story about using the coach and being able to get a big hardcover book out for a great salary from Penguin Random House. So what advice do you have to people that might want to do a similar book?
Yeah, I think the best advice that I would give is just ask other authors, even if you don't know them, like just find people who might be willing to talk to you. What I found was that almost anybody I asked for advice answered and either got on the phone with me or just talked to me over email. I was kind of blown away at how open people were with their time. I think fellow authors just, they want to give their advice, they want to help. And I mean, my acknowledgments of my book is probably like an entire paragraph of writers I barely knew who were just kind enough to let me talk to them and pick their brains for advice. So that would be my biggest
Although I
thing.
wrote a mentor book, and I just want to add, a great way is to email someone and say, I bought your book, I loved it, you're amazing. I think that's sort of a better way to do it than, hey, I'm trying to sell a book, I want a lot of money for it, can I pick your brain?
Yeah, and a lot of it was, a lot
Yeah.
of people I spoke to were through some sort of connection.
Yeah.
But I was just surprised at how kind everyone was with their time. And then I did, yes, buy all of their books.
Good, good. Okay, Lina. So you were writing for a long time, and I know you were a science writer and an editor. So, and then you had such a huge hit with The Other Dark Matter. So what advice would you give?
My advice would be never give up. See, my story started way longer than that. English is not my first language. I came to this country as a dumb immigrant without speaking any English in my 20s, and I wanted to be a writer because I always wrote in my first language. And that was the only career I ever wanted. And so many people laughed in my face when I said that. You don't become a writer in a language you don't speak when you're 20-something years old. And I didn't listen to anyone. Just took longer than most. So never give up. Never let anybody tell you that, no, you won't be published because you're just not a writer.
And you have funny competition. So all of a sudden I find out that your son has a best-selling chess book out, right?
My son has a best-selling chess book out. And I should say that that book, The Other Dark Matter, was optioned for a TV series. So I'm sitting here now waiting to see where that's going to go.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, Sharon. So what advice do you give? I love what you said about, don't listen to naysayers that are probably jealous and say stupid things about your writing. What other advice can you give to people that might publish a novel, a hardcover novel, and it for a great publisher like you did?
I think I would say, in addition to what everyone else has said, don't sell yourself short. Because of the way that the writing industry has gone today, there are a lot of small publishers and a lot of people take money and telling you they're going to do a lot of stuff that they can't do. So just take your time and really look for what you're looking for and hold on to that. I got an offer from a small publisher before I got my agent. And everyone around me was super, super excited about it. I was super excited about it. They were going to offer me no advance. Their marketing platform and the budget that they were going to put into it was something I could have put in out of my own pocket. They wanted to own a lot of the copyright and all this other stuff. And if I had gotten this offer when I lived in New York, I think I would have taken it, because when I lived in New York, I was an artist, but I lived for 10 years in Houston as a businesswoman, and that just didn't make sense to me. So I said no without any other offer on the table. I just took a chance because I just felt like this is not the right thing for me. So if you're getting something that just feels like it's not right intuitively, go with what you know in your gut, because it's the right thing to do.
You know what else is so smart though, is that because you are, in a completely different field, I love the fact that you delegated responsibility and hired an editor 3 different times to help you. So I think that that's really a brilliant thing to do, because I think there's a lot of people that are just like, they've never written before in their lives, they're in a completely different field, and they just do it their way, and they're not willing to compromise, and they don't ask for help, and then they get pissed off. But you didn't get pissed off. You went to the right person, and then you didn't give up. I love that you went through.
I did. And the other thing is I did my research. I was like, okay, this is what I need in the editing. And I know that after I worked with one editor for 6 months, that first editor, and she'd been looking at it for so much that I knew that it needed to go to the next level, but she couldn't take me there. I knew that. So I kindly went to another editor without dismissing what she did, because she did an amazing thing. I just went to the next one because you have to take it to the next level.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. Okay, Tyler, I know that you teach writing at the New School, and it seems as if a lot of people that I know do extremely well taking classes. My class is NYU, the New School, Columbia, CUNY. So do you think that if someone wants to be a writer and they have no traditional background, that taking a class could help?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think I got into writing because I got into journalism because I felt like I was going interesting places and having conversations with interesting people, and I wanted to keep doing that, but I didn't know how to get paid to do it. And so I think the trick for me was I went to Sue's class and I think I took it 4 times, but I had things that I wanted to say in my writing. And again, I'm a reporter, so I had places I wanted to go. I had people I wanted to talk to, but I didn't know how to express that. So yeah, for me, I mean, I think taking a class was the only way I would have been able to turn like this interest I had in weird people in weird places into any kind of marketable product. 'Cause I had no idea what that looked like. So I think it was critical.
I remember correctly, you published pretty early on. You started publishing pieces pretty fast.
Yeah, I would say it took a while before I published something that I really liked, though, that was what I wanted to do. I did a few little book reviews and stuff like that, and you helped me do those, and that was sort of in keeping with your class. But I think it was a year or two, I think, before I published something that like felt like this is what I'm trying to do.
Oh, by the way, that reminds me is that we have so many people with upcoming books, and it would be if anybody wants to do book reviews, author profiles, Q&As, or roundup pieces for new books. There's so many authors with new books, so there's some fantastic ideas out here. And if you want to know how to do that, email me. Okay, banning. So any other advice that you could give? I mean, you know, one of the things that I always say to people is that writing is a way to turn your worst experiences into the most beautiful. And your whole piece, I love the piece in Washington Post, which was about healing. Any other advice that you could give to people? Again, you know, it's hard. It's a hard market for memoirs.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much advice I can give, and I shared my email in the chat if anybody'd like to send me a message. You know, I'll just spitball a few out there, but there's a few I'll emphasize. One is write every day and write absolutely from the heart what you're loving. And like every word you put down should feel like part of you. Don't write because you want to get published, write because you love the story you're writing or you love what you're writing about. I think don't get hung up in chasing publishing or writing to be published or wanting a certain agent. You know, I was hungry to get an agent, especially as a debut author, but I realized very kind of halfway through the process that you will find the right agent, and that agent will love what you do and love what you write, and they will understand you as a person. They'll be an advocate for you. And that's just so important. Don't be hungry to find an agent. Be hungry to find the right agent. I think probably the biggest piece of advice I give anyone, and I'll echo what so many people have said: build people in the community, other writers. It's such an opaque industry. It's so hard to understand what to do and where you're going. And I think having fellow authors, especially in your genre, will help you so much to understand what you're doing. But I think the biggest
By
piece
the way,
of
that's
advice
another benefit of writing classes and writing groups, going to book events, because you meet other writers. I think that's
Yeah.
great. Okay.
I think that, okay.
Yeah, Stella.
Last thing, and I think this is so important. Write until you fail, write until you burn out, and write through that. So many studies show that doing something that you're good at to the point of failure and then continuing opens up a new part of our brain, our neurology. And right past burning out, you'll get burned out, just keep writing, you'll find a new place.
Great. Stella. So another one, Banning and Stella, with debut books from, you know, major houses for great money. So what advice do you give for people that Stella, in your category, it's self-help and career. So what advice do you give for someone that might want to try that?
For me, my resistance was my greatest teacher. So I know resistance, like procrastination, like fighting with the writing, can feel really painful. But it actually ended up being instructional for me. It actually ended up inspiring what I was writing about. It kind of helped teach me more about the very content I was trying to share. So I think everything serves a purpose, including the delays and the upsets and the resistance. So I didn't believe it for 80% of the time, but at the end I saw how it all was in service of me producing something that felt true and right, and hopefully at the right time. So if anyone's feeling discouraged.
Orlando.
Yes. So my final advice would be just to ask questions, especially in Sue's classes, take her classes. Happy birthday again. And one question can really like open all the doors. My question in that class the to Lisa was about if I needed an illustrator to pitch my book. And when I mentioned the Hollywood pitch, that's when I got the attention on my ideas. So be open to questions or ask questions, and then also be open to feedback. Feedback.
Cool. And I would add, in my case, therapy really helped, a great shrink, taking classes, writing group, and ghost editors. And if anybody wants to email me, profsue123@gmail.com, I can recommend the ghost editors that I've worked with. And just very last question for everyone, what would help you right now? So personally, I love when people follow me on social media. And so if anybody's interested, do that. And of course, you guys can anybody that's at the panel can email me questions. But does anybody have anything specific? Do you want people to write about you and pitch pieces? Do you need people to come to an upcoming event? Do you need more coaching clients? Do you want people to, post about your book or buy it in advance? So let's see if there's anything quickly. So, Hyeseung, what would help you the most? So your book comes out over the summer from Simon & Schuster.
Yeah, just supporting it on social media and pre-ordering it. A lot of my family have been pre-ordering, but they do it from Amazon. If you can support your local indie bookseller, that's the best thing. Thank you so much.
Good. Mark Jason Williams for Out in the World.
Yeah, same, pre-order, plug it on social media, and some clips about me and Amy in the book would be awesome. Thank you so much.
A great story. In fact, that would be like the perfect June Pride story about your book. Amy, what would help you?
Same thing, just pre-order for yourself or a friend, or buy. I think just when we buy each other's books, we help everybody. So yeah, pre-order is always super helpful. And just even passing on, you don't have to order, just pass along a link to a friend saying, hey, thought of you when I saw this book. That always helps too. So
yeah, by the way, I just went to this panel and these amazing authors were speaking, and you post a picture of their book and you post a link. That's a cool thing to do. Raj, do you have any upcoming events still, Raj?
Yeah, I mean, I'm giving a talk here on Thursday down in Miami, Fort Lauderdale about best ways to promote your book, but I don't know if any of you are down here, but yeah, if you can just, my memoir just came out a few months ago called Colorful Palate. If you want to order it, I appreciate it, and posting about it would be great. And if you try any other recipes from the book, send me a photo.
Cool. Alyssa.
Yeah, I'm going to echo what everyone said. Just buying a copy is great. Mine is out in the world, so you can buy it now and it will come to your home, I think, pretty quickly. Posting on social media is awesome. And yeah, if anybody writes reviews or author profiles, please reach out because that would be wonderful too. Thank you.
Lina.
Please buy the book. I promise you a few good loves, and you'll never flush the same way again. Somebody mentioned potty training?
Sharon.
Yeah, I've posted my Substack link in the chat, so I would love to see everyone follow me there. And yeah, you can get the book. It's called The Blue Is Where God Lives, and it's out and you can get it anywhere. And if you're in Houston on February 4th, I'll be speaking at the Unitarian Church, and I'd love to see you in the audience. Thank you.
Fantastic. Tyler.
Yeah, I'm here. My book's been out for a while, so you can order it if you want. I'm not on social media, so I won't know if you link it or post it or whatever. But yeah, I would just like somebody to read it. I think it's an interesting book, and I'd like to know what people think. Thank you.
Yeah, by the way, if you ever read an author's book and you email them and tell them why you liked it, that's a wonderful thing to do. That's fantastic. I love when people do that. Banning. So yours comes out. Tell me again the pub date.
June 4th.
Okay, so you're going to be doing events, right?
Yeah, I'll be doing book readings. I'm recording the audiobook soon. Oh, sorry. I'm like messing up my messages. And so my only, what I could use right now is the same as everybody else. I'm just going to echo it. Pre-order my book, please. Pre-order, one for a friend. Plug me on social media. My Instagram's Banning Rights. And you can find me on Facebook. I posted my email in the chat. You can email me. Just and support fellow authors, please. And buy from a small bookstore. Don't buy from Amazon, please.
Cool. Stella.
I love pre-orders and any connections to HR, learning and development, leadership, parts of an organization for hopefully supporting employees at work to work happier.
Cool. Orlando.
Yes, so pre-orders just went out like last week. So it's a children's book. So if you have kids, nieces, nephews, grandkids, also yeah. And I'm a Latinx writer, so just like if you write for publications centered around that, that'd be awesome.
Fantastic. Anyway, congratulations to everybody on these fantastic book projects, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. And anybody that wants to email me, now that I quit all my other addictions and wrote about it, I'm addicted to email, so especially late at night. So if anybody has any questions, email. And as I said, remember, being a good literary citizen, it's probably the thing that helped me the most with my books. Is that very early on, I was not only was like a literary groupie, I went to readings all the time. I did tons of book reviews and the book column, and I was always plugging other people's books. And I was writing for 23 years before I got my own first deal, and I was very frustrated and felt like a failure. And it turned out that all that great karma was just waiting, and it came back to me. So I would say, yeah, be a good literary citizen. And as I said, just post about any of the books here. And if anybody wants to email me about how to do book reviews or author profiles for any of these great books, I'll be happy to.
Sue,
Yes,
can I add one last thing?
sure.
I saw one of the people in this class, one of the authors like us. I hadn't published it. I saw her in this class, and I reached out to her and said, I'm doing X, but I want to write. And would you talk to me? And she spent like an hour talking to me on how to like transition over to where I wanted to be. And within months, I transitioned. So I just want to offer that to any of you guys. If you're trying to figure out how to get from where you are to where you want to be as a writer, I put my email in the chat. Just email me and I'll jump on a call with you.
It's cool. Somebody actually told me that all you need to change is one change agent, which could be a teacher, a mentor, a colleague, a shrink, somebody who believes in you, a ghost editor, an agent, somebody who believes in you that could help you. So yeah, so that would be great. Anybody else want to add any advice or anything? Any of the panelists? No, well, thank you guys so much. Great to see everybody.